Hey y'all, it's Kate from the Literary Apothecary, and welcome back to another episode of Bibliotherapy Sunday. So today we're going to be talking about classic influences for the modern science fiction writers. Last week we talked about fantasy. So first, let's just start off with talking about what is science fiction. What are themes that they deal with in science fiction books? Because a lot of people combine science fiction and fantasy, but they're two different genres that can share some bits, but very different. So science fiction focuses on science and technology of a given world. It often includes space travel, robots, time travel, mad scientists, and societies living in space or other worlds. There's often dystopian worlds or utopian worlds, a lot of different space travel and that kind of thing. So when we talk about science fiction, let's talk about the beginnings of science fiction first. A lot of people don't realize that science fiction goes way back to the ancient Indian epic poetry, which focused on flying machines that can travel through space. They had magical birds and time travel. And then you jump to the Arabian Nights tales, and there was tales about magical medicines, a herb of immortality, and space travel, talking animals and talking trees, and the ability to breathe underwater, and lost ancient technologies. All of this had influenced the classics that we're going to talk about today. So some classics that have influenced our science fiction writers include Sir Thomas More and his Utopia, which built this perfect utopian society and ulterior world. And that's where we got the term utopian from. We can't talk about classic influences without mentioning William Shakespeare and The Tempest, which was a classic mad scientist tale. You have Margaret Cavendish, who wrote The Blazing World, which was an ulterior new world. Of course, you have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, but a lesser known work by Mary Shelley, also The Last Man, which was one of the first apocalyptic dystopian novels. You can't talk about science fiction without mentioning Jules Verne. He wrote Journey to the Center of the Earth, which was a mad scientist who believed that there were volcanic tubes that reached to the center of the earth, and this had inspired other writers like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Edgar Rice Burroughs. Jules Verne also wrote From the Earth to the Moon, which dealt with building an army and weapons with the ultimate goal of a moon landing. And of course, the ultimate classic, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which dealt with Captain Nemo's ship, the Nautilus, which was actually a precursor to today's submarine ships. You have H.G. Wells and the Time Machine, which dealt with time travel, and The War of the Worlds, which had Mars technology and space travel. We mentioned Sir Arthur Conan Doyle earlier, which he wrote Sherlock Holmes, which everyone knows who Sherlock Holmes is, but in case you don't, he's a detective that uses logic and reasoning and basically science to solve crimes and murders. You have Dune by Frank Herbert, which was an ulterior world, space, magic, drugs to extend life. And another classic, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. We get the mad scientists and the magic potions and all of the crazy sci-fi worlds. A lot of these titles and authors will sound familiar because these have either inspired adaptations to movies and TV shows, or the themes from their books have inspired future TV shows and movies. And then you have some science fiction writers today that have been influenced by these themes, tropes, and past writers, and that use these in their writing today. You have Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, which is now a movie with Matt Damon that uses obviously Mars and space and aliens. Brandon Sanderson, who is a well-known fantasy writer, also wrote a YA science fiction series. This is the first book in that series, Skyward, and I have done reviews on this, so I'll link them in the description. This deals with a world in space and aliens and talking machines, talking ships, and it is just fantastic. You have Ready Player One and now Ready Player Two by Ernest Cline, which deals with a space world and video games and a lot of science and technology and everything that's built into science fiction themes. You have, of course, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, which is a dystopian world where these kids are forced to fight for their lives. You have the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey, which deals with space travel and space worlds and dystopia. And this is a space opera, which is the first that I've heard of. And that's now a TV show. And you get The Three-Body Problem, which delves into the humanity's place in cosmos. So it takes a little bit deeper dive than some of these other books and talks about the theory and the philosophy behind all of that. There's Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, which is a dystopian world in the middle of a global pandemic that has wiped out most of the world's population. And you're probably listening to that description and saying, that sounds really familiar today. This was written before the COVID pandemic, but one of the great things about it is now we can relate to it because we're going through this global pandemic now. And there's also N.K. Jemisin, who wrote the 5th season in the Broken Earth trilogy, which deals with an apocalyptic disaster world. And so those are just some of today's science fiction writers that have been influenced by the classics. So if you're a classic reader and you want to read more of today's writing, those are some readers that you can think of, or vice versa. If you read a lot of science fiction today and you want to read some classics, there's a place to start for that. So there's so many different science fiction books and writers out there. Let me know which ones you like to read in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, keep reading, and I love you all to the moon and back.